Birkeland is a geologist and 50-year fellow with the Geological Society of America. He's the guy I saw yesterday who scared scared the wits out of me yesterday. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing just great, and the last thing I want to do is scare people, but I sure want to inform them.
Well, if there's any validity to your beliefs at all, there's no harm in being prepared. That's for sure.
Oh, so, yeah, don't be scared, be prepared. That's a good watchword.
Did we just make that up together now? Should we patent that or something?
Well, I was the co-author.
Oh, okay. I can't take credit for it. So, Jim, let's just explain that kind of the bigger picture theory about, because you're not the only one who's talking about the fact that we've had earthquakes in Chile, we've had them in New Zealand, we've had them in Japan, and, this is all part of one big plate that's moving, but it's stuck in California. Can you just go over the basics of that?
Well, let me just give it an almost exact parallel to what we're facing right there. This was Friday afternoon, October 13th, 1989, and the headline is High Tides to Mean Little Trouble in Bay Area. The highest tides in several years will occur. Well, I'd known that in December of 1986, 3 years before the World Series quake, we were going to have extremely high tides, and I went to the meeting of the Peninsula Geological Society and said I expected a quake of 3.5 to 5.5 magnitude to hit the Bay Area at the time of these extreme tides. And there was a little shock in the audience, but my former colleague at the USGS was the president of the club, and he's the one that allowed me to make this mention. And sure enough, 2 weeks later, we had the highest tides of the year in several years. And that morning on the way to work, just before I left for work, a 4.6 quake hit about 5 miles from my house. And it was felt all up and down, Santa Rosa and Monterey. And so it was a fairly impressive little jolt, and but no damage I know about. But I got high praise from the president of the Peninsula Geological Society, and I was a little concerned because he sent me a little card to congratulations, said, "I'll never doubt you again, Jim." And I thought, my gosh, he's a 35-year geologist with the organization. He's risking his career by agreeing with me. Well, it turned out he had just retired at the end of the year, so he could say what he wanted. Well, that same day, there was an article in the Gilroy Dispatch on Friday the 13th of October, and you'll see a little item, is World Series quake coming? While the area is rumbling with excitement about the first ever Bay Bridge World Series, the Earth may be putting on its own show. And so I was predicting to the reporter, I said it's 6.5 to 7, which I'd told my colleagues because of the extreme tides, and there had been kind of a delay since the last strong quake in the Bay Area. But not only did we have these extreme tides, we had extreme numbers of missing pets. And thanks to a Argentinian physicist, he had alerted me in 1979 that he could predict local quakes based upon the numbers of missing cats in the local paper.
Hey, Jim, I'm going to stop you there because we kind of moved off. You skipped past plate theory and moved on to something else. And you'd have established, I guess, some credibility in people's minds when you say, you predicted a couple of these earthquakes ahead of time. But when you bring in animals and stuff, people, you may lose a lot of people. So let's take a break and come back and discuss that more and why you think that's relevant.
That's half the story.
All right. Jim Birkeland, the geologist, 50-year fellow with the Geological Society of America, predicting an earthquake in California imminently, almost. I mean, we're with it by the time the month is over. Jim Birkeland is a geologist, 50-year fellow with the Geological Society of America, but he's also on this issue kind of a rebel.
Oh, yes, a maverick. That's what the book is about. The man who predicts earthquakes, Jim Birkeland, the maverick geologist. And I'm proud of it.
Anyway. Hold on, Jim. Just back it up a little bit. It's easy to find, and I've searched, it's easy to find people in your field who will agree that an earthquake in one area can trigger earthquakes nearby.
That's a recent development in the field of geology.
You're right. And 10 years ago, you couldn't find that. You're right. 10 years ago, you couldn't find that.
Right.
So now there are others, and I want to know if you're one of them, who believe that an earthquake far away, like in Japan, like the one in Chile and New Zealand, can have an impact to put extra stress on something like the San Andreas Fault or on the nearby fault lines here. Do you believe that?
Yes.
Okay, so that is 50% of your worry right now for California?
Well, I have a number of worries. The fish that died at Redondo Beach and the earthquake fish, the oar fish that washed up at Malibu last December. That's an earthquake fish that the Japanese are frightened about. But let's just deal with animals. Or let me just deal with tides.
Well, I want to deal with fish. What does the fish have to do with earthquakes?
Well, the orientation of whales and sharks and salmon and dolphins and birds, they are able to navigate by means of a magnetic field, and they have magnetite in their bodies. And this has only been known for about the last 30 years. And we know that the magnetic field of the Earth is affected by solar storms and also affected by local tectonic forces as earthquakes are about to develop. And so you can pick up areas that where animals are running away from home, or deep sea fish coming into shallow water. And although the fish killer was down the beach with 1 million fish came into shallow water and died because there wasn't enough oxygen, and they were supposedly chased in by predator fish, which is baloney. Then you had lots of the whales that just drew off.
Okay, so what's throwing them off, and how does that affect the Earth's crust?
The way they navigate is by means of the magnetic field, and when the magnetic field gets distorted by changes in the Earth's magnetic, the magnetic grains, the magnetite, and you can reproduce this in the laboratory. It makes them very unsettled. And so wild animals will come into town, and your pets will run away in many cases. And deep sea fish come to shallow water. And
so what's happening to change the magnetic field in this area?
That's what I'm looking for right now. One thing that's building up is the highest tidal force that we will see till the year 2016. And I'm concerned about this upcoming period, which I call a seismic window, between the 19th and the 26th. It's almost identical to what happened in October 14 to 21 of 1989 when I predicted a World Series earthquake in the newspaper. So right now, if you go to a tide calendar, and I'm loaded with them every year, you will see on the 19th we have the full moon called the worm moon. It was only less than an hour away from the closest approach to the moon in several years. Certainly the closest approach of the month, and that's called perigee. And then the next day
that's the two things happening at once: a full moon and the moon closer to Earth.
Right, and that's every 27 and a half days for the perigee, and every.
All right, now hold on. Before you just dismiss that as quackery,
because of spring, the opening day of spring with the equinoctial tides. So three things happening within 24 hours.
Okay, and we do accept that the moon impacts on the oceans and lakes and seas, right? We understand that the moon causes the seas to move, but how does that impact on dry land or something like the San Andreas Fault, which is not in water?
Good point, because we have an earth tide, and I didn't recognize that till about 20 years ago.
What's an earth tide?
It's from the same force, the sun and moon lining up especially. The solid earth moves up and down every day. And when I worked 6 years with the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation, one of my jobs was to study observation wells along the California aqueduct. They were just drilled to see what happened to the water levels in case we were accused of drying up wells or flooding out the farmers. So once a week I'd change the recorder, and you could see every day the water level would go up and down about 1/4 of an inch, twice. So there was a tide in the groundwater. And that sort of thing is magnified tremendously because the main thing holding a fault together is friction. And if you can just reduce that frictional resistance to movement a little bit, then if a fault is ready to fail, this often can do it. So we know that there is a definite connection to this. Now, when I was 3 years old with the Long Beach earthquake, my family moved us out of Long Beach about a month before the terrible earthquake that they say now admit would have killed about 30,000 kids had school still been in session, but it was about 5:45 at night instead of 3 o'clock. The day of that earthquake was the day of an eclipse of the moon. And then the next big one in Southern California was the San Fernando quake in 1971 on February 9th.
Just stop for a second, Jim. An eclipse of the moon, how does an eclipse of the moon change any relationship between the Earth and the moon, given that it's just a light is being blocked? There's no other phenomena going on.
There's gravity going on between the sun and moon and Earth. It's like a tug of war.
Yeah, but that doesn't change when there's less light on the moon.
We don't worry about the light. We worry about the gravity.
But that's what an eclipse is.
It's like, when the sun is setting, the moon will be rising in the east at the same time, and we are right in a tug of war. And when that tug of war occurs perfectly, it's with an eclipse. And you can't deny that the Long Beach quake was on the day of the eclipse, and the next big one in Southern California was the Northridge quake, which was also on the day of an eclipse of the moon.
Okay, Jim Birkeland is a geologist, 50-year fellow with the Geological Society of America, and you have predicted other quakes. It's in writing.
Hundreds.
Yeah.
I've been writing a newsletter. I just mailed out last week my 255th monthly newsletter since the World Series quake. And the reason I started my newsletter, I was ordered never again to predict a quake on county time by my bosses at the at the county of Santa Clara.
All right, so Jim, you've talked about two things. One is plate theory and how earthquakes far away can add stresses. You've talked about the impact of the moon and how that the tides and how that we see in animal behavior and all of those things. Now we'll take a break. Can we come back and put those things together and then tell us exactly what your prediction is for Southern California? Can you wait a few minutes?
Sure can.
Okay, so Jim, what does the fish washing up to shore in Redondo Beach or getting trapped in the harbor there and dying, the Japanese earthquake, the full moon, the proximity of the moon that we're going to see in the next little while, what does that add up to? What are you predicting, where and when?
My monthly newsletter, I predicted March 29th to 26th. 3.5 to 7 within 140 miles of San Francisco, 3.5 to 7 within 140 miles of Los Angeles, 3.5 to 7 with an epicenter located in Washington, Oregon, and a 7 plus globally, probably in the Pacific Ring of Fire. And a major quake occurs about once a month, about 15 a year, and a great earthquake normally about once a year. And but
wait, are you predicting, Jim? Are you predicting major earthquakes in all of those places between the 19th and 26th?
You have to look at the lower level. 3.5 is not major, but and it's not even damaging. But if you get up to about a 5.5, those are the kinds of quakes that I've been predicting with the greatest care if I have enough additional information. And so, as I say, the seismic window based on tides tells me when, but it doesn't tell me where or how big. And that's where I rely upon local factors such as changes in thermal springs, geysers, animal reactions, patterns of small earthquakes. They then help me fix down the area of where and sometimes how big.
So what are you saying for Southern California?
I'm really concerned because of the animals that have preceded this huge tides coming up. And so I think mainly inland, not right on the coast, even though that's where the tide ranges are greatest. So I'm not so much concerned right now at the Bay Area, but in the Los Angeles area where my son's family lives and my other family, and then the Pacific Northwest. And those are the areas that are right now under the gun and I have greatest concern about. But I'm not calling for a 9 or an 8 at this point, and I see no reason to,
You're telling your family to get out?
Not at all. No.
What are you telling them?
I'm just saying, be informed that this is a time of the highest tidal force that I've been concerned about since 1989. And at that point, remember, it was 3 years after the previous prediction of the high tides and that occurred with a big quake. So prepare yourself. It doesn't hurt to have transistor radios and extra batteries and flashlights and extra food stored up, and understand that you may lose, lights and ability to have immediate salvation from Red Cross and other. But I do.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of attention right now, Jim, because of what just happened in Japan, more than usual. And if this doesn't happen, you're going to have a big uphill battle credibility-wise, I would say.
Well, I've missed 25% of my 75%. I hit 75% of my predictions. And so, but these are extreme tides, and I mentioned that, you remember, there was the Long Beach and the San Fernando quake was also the Northridge quake, and I was with the Birkeland family reunion in Northridge on January 1st and 2nd of that year, and my big window was about to open on the 9th, and it closed on midnight on the 16th, and your Northridge quake happened on the 17th. So early, but I was 4.5 hours off on that.
Thank you, Jim. Appreciate your time.
Okay.
Jim Birkeland, geologist, 50-year fellow with the Geological Society of America.